Alright, so welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how you can quickly insert charts within your Excel document or within your spreadsheet document. And essentially essentially, charts are very useful for visual representation of your data. And I often include charts. I often encourage persons who use spreadsheets to include charts, because often when we create a spreadsheet, we know the data, we understand the data, and we understand the type of information that we're trying to represent, but the audience does not. And so, looking at my example sheet here, for example, doesn't matter how well I know the data or how much I know what has transpired statistically over time. My audience might not know that, right? And so it might be more prudent to include a chart here to represent the data. It provides a visual representation, making it easier to understand patterns and trends and even relationships just at the first glance, right? So as the creator or the editor of a spreadsheet program, you're now going to be able to communicate complex information in a much more accessible and intuitive manner to your audience, and allowing those stakeholders to grasp the key insights quickly. They're able to make those data comparisons, or identify the trends, or even summarize the data in much more meaningful ways, right? So in order for us to create a chart, we would need to go to the Insert tab. But it's important for us to remember that this is just an application, and you can't just tell the application, hey, go to the charts group from the Insert tab and create, let's say, a column chart, right? Because the program will not understand in essence what you're asking it to do. In fact, here it gave me an empty applet because that's all I said, create a chart. So we have to be a little bit more hands-on, and we have to first tell the program where it should be getting the data from to create this chart. So for example, I'd like to include, or I'd like the application to understand that I'm doing both the months and the regions, and under each region and for each month there are a specific amount of units being sold, right? And so I will simply highlight that entire region that I would like to include in my data analysis representation. It is also key for us to only select the data that we would like to include. So in this case, I'd like to include data for all regions. So I'm going to select that, I'm going to insert, and it might be most appropriate here to do something like a column chart, because the column chart will essentially show the data for each region and month, and you'll notice that it is color coded as well. The reason why we're having so many columns in here is because we have all columns, all regions, all regions and all months, right? So that's a lot of information to put inside a chart. If this was only 2 regions, for example, it would be better readable. What we might want to do, or in some instances, what we might do is to compare specific regions. So if I wanted to compare region 1, for example, let's say with region 7, I could also do that by selecting that and then inserting the chart that way. Now, how did I select non-adjacent cells? I started with the first set of cells, region 1. I held Control on the keyboard, and then I selected the next set of cells for region 7. So without holding down Control, I was able to select region 7 as well, and then I could repeat those steps for regions 1 and 7 so that they can be compared accordingly. All right, so 2 ways you could select the entire data set if you need to, and then you would go to the charts group from the insert tab, and you would choose the chart, like a pie chart or a column chart, that best represents the data that you're trying to essentially include in your sheet. And I do think a time line chart is probably most appropriate here for the data, if you're including all the data, if your set looks like mine. But if you only wanted to compare two specific components from the data, then you would highlight those two. I'd like to see January and May, for example, and you highlight them by holding Control on the keyboard to select those non-adjacent cells. And then from here, you could choose the chart that you find to be most appropriate for the type of data that you are including. Now, note that your chart becomes an object, so you can now select on your object and you can move this object anywhere on your sheet. Note that you can also select different objects within the object, like your chart title here can be changed to your title. And because this is also an object, note that if you jump to your home tab, you can change how this object is being represented so it matches the theme. And then you have the chart elements option here that allows you to provide different types of information and data to the chart as needed, right? So you can essentially play around with that, and you can change your style of your chart as well from the section here. And then finally, you can essentially choose to filter out data that you do not want to be represented in the chart. So you have so much that is afforded to you once you have included your chart inside your sheet. And then one final element, often persons choose not to have the chart with the data. They would like the chart to just be represented on its own, which is fine. If you don't want to have it next to the data, you can jump to your chart design tab. Now note that if you're not within the chart, if you've not selected the chart, you won't get that chart design tab, right? So the chart itself, or an object within the chart, must be selected for you to get your chart design tab. And from here, you could choose to then move your chart to another sheet, right? If you have several sheets in here, maybe you want it to be beside a summary of the units sold, or an explanation of the units sold, you can do that. Or you could essentially choose to have a chart sheet on its own displaying this new chart, and you could give that chart sheet a name that represents the chart itself, and hit OK. So once more, chart design tab with the chart selected, of course. Move chart from the location group, and from here you could choose new sheet or an object in an existing sheet. I only have one sheet at the moment, so that's the only sheet I could include it in. Unless I choose a new sheet, I could rename this sheet and hit OK. And when I do, I now have this brand new sheet that only displays the chart. So if I'm giving a presentation, this might be a good way to go about it. Thank you.